Text Robin Schwartz. Hey there, exclamation point. I started the Zoom. Are you going to join it? Question mark. I would like to make someone else a co-host in case there's a bomber. Let me know. Wait, you just walked in.
Okay, it's set.
Let's go.
Yeah, so I think that would be a relatively minor thing. It's fine. That's my part of it.
You tell me that. Are we good to go? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. We're going to get started. So I wanted to ask you to turn your heads up here for a little bit. I am Mary Lorson. I'm really grateful to you all for being here and joining me in this creative endeavor that's shared and a little slightly risky, but harm-free, and the time to exercise being open, taking a slight risk. I wanted to read this poem to you. I didn't write it, but I read it this morning, and it really spoke to me about why I like doing this thing and things like it. So I'll just read it to you, and then, first let me explain the situation for those of you who don't know. This is random. There's 7 musicians here, there's 7 readers here, and they have been paired with 7 writers, most of whom are here. And what will happen is we will all assemble in a circle. I'm one of the readers, and we're going to spin a bottle, but I want to ask one of the audience members to spin the bottle. So I'll tap an audience member, or I will accept volunteers. We'll get that, we'll spin the bottle, and then the reader will come up here, and the musician will go to their instrument, and then we will hear their collaboration on the fly. So that's how that works. So it's really quite easy. Here we go. This is a poem I read this morning called Spiritual Window Shoppers. These spiritual window shoppers who idly ask, how much is that? Oh, I'm just looking. They handle 100 items and put them down, shadows with no capital. What is spent is love and 2 eyes wet with weeping. But these walk into a shop and their whole lives pass suddenly in that moment, in that shop. Where did you go? Nowhere. What did you have to eat? Nothing much. Even if you don't know what you want, buy something to be a part of the general exchange. Start a huge, foolish project. Like Noah, it makes absolutely no difference what people think of you. The clear bead at the center changes everything. There are no edges to my loving now. You've heard it said, there's a window that opens from one mind to the other. But if there's no wall, there's no need for fitting the window or the latch. Let's go for it.
Everybody get in the circle, yeah? So musicians and readers are going to get in the circle now. And I ask you to volunteer to spin the bottle. Thank you so much. So there should be 14 people. I think there are in the circle.
So far, this doesn't look like a circle.
No, I agree.
It's a right. Let's get some design. Draw.
And Billy.
Hey. Oh, I thought you spent twice until you get okay. Just keep it simple.
Yeah, but it's gonna be.
Well, it won't always be
Yeah.
a writer and a reader.
As long as there's a reader and a writer, we're good to go. So Mickie, you're all set.
Oh, all right.
And you're off the couch.
We gotta-
All right, that's good.
Oh, we're gonna do it.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Quinn, and I'm going to be reading a piece by John Frankel. Woo! It's like that, you know, that finding that perfect angle of microphone and being able to see things. Can you hear me okay? All right. Manhattan, 2516, excerpt of Isle of Dogs, Part 4. First, Sargon went to Officer Quick. They were walking down Broadway. It was a hot, rainy day. The rain came in, squalls of high, whipping winds, and then would abruptly cease. The sun came out and baked the streets dry until another band darkened the island. They approached Julian's pool hall. "That prick owes me," said Officer Quick. "We were here last week," Sargon reminded him. Keeping track was part of his job. "Yeah, so what? He shorted us. He sells heroin now, plus the new machines." "Did he include the new machines?" "No." Julian's wasn't operated by Julian, but by Elliot. Julian was Elliot's dead twin. 20 years earlier, Elliot watched his brother die a horrible death and hadn't spoken to anyone since, except for business. He also owned the Bowlodrome on University, a bowling alley decorated like a Hindu temple. The workers had blue skin and dressed in gold pantaloons. The doorways were decorated with gold leaf and painted scarlet flames, like portals between heavens and hells. They served the hottest curry on the east side, but the pool hall was traditional. Elliot had grown tired of patrons going up the street to buy heroin. He might as well sell it himself, but he didn't want to pay the tax. He didn't want to shtup the cops, so he skipped them both. But Quick knew everything that crept on the street. If a roach got fucked by another roach, he knew. "Elliot's okay." "Elliot's okay," said Sargon. He's just sad about his brother. It's been decades. You know how he bit it?" "No one ever says. They always look away in shame." Quick nodded grimly. "Let's get some coffee. I need a boost before shaking down that prick." They took 2 stools at the last grind and ordered from Jill. The last grind waitress's breasts were burst out of skimpy bodices with nipples etched on the front, and they wore a silver Statue of Liberty crowns. Jill brought them coffees and smiles. Quick slowly stirred in 3 spoons of sugar, one at a time, before adding a plop of cream. "Always melt the sugar first," he muttered, as he had on numerous occasions before. Quick regarded all information to be of equal value, and he was solemn in his belief that his job was to impart young Sargon a steady stream of chestnuts. Leave the safety on, wipe a baby's ass front to back, never towards the genitals, avoid stepping into puddles on the corner. Never walk on sidewalk doors, muzzle control. Always clear the chamber before you clean your gun. Use a condom with street whores. Reindeer brings out the sun. Shake down junkies before they buy if you want money. The most important thing to learn is patrol officer rarely draws their gun and hardly ever uses it. In 35 years of patrol, I've fired it once, and that was to take down an armed gorilla. How the beast got a firearm, we were never sure, but he weighed 600 pounds and a head like a coconut. They sipped their coffee and quick, looking out the window at the evaporating puddles, said, "This used to be a good town. Used to be everyone knew their place, who to kick up to, how much and where. Hookers stayed on their corners. Punks gave it up when you leaned on them. The bosses took care of the cops. Woman goes into labor, cops will deliver it and bring her to the hospital. Peace on the streets. Everyone getting by. Students were polite to their teachers. The garbage got picked up. None of this strike bullshit. Horses and people crapping in the gutter. Graffiti so bad you can't see out the train windows. Criminals and anarchists on the streets. Dogs everywhere biting people. And shit, rats. I hate rats. Came to work this morning and 20 rats come out of a garbage bag. Saw 2 rats fucking in an alley. You ever see that before? The streets are like their living room now. We're fucked. The red suits, they don't know shit about public order. Sure, business is up. For us, bad times are always good times. People are afraid. They live for today. Fuck tomorrow. Booming business for bunco. I'd rather have it quiet. You take Elliot. That son of a bitch never felt the need to sell heroin. He had the tables and the booze and the cigarettes, and that was enough. And now he's thinking, what if I have to fuck off in the middle of the night? How am I gonna pay the border guards upstate? How am I gonna cross the Mohawk Nation and get to Canada? If he goes south, what's there for him? Nothing. A northern man heads north. He never goes south. Remember that if you're ever chasing fugitives. Go south, you don't turn up shit. But go north, there they are in some cabin in the woods not 5 miles from their mother's house. I hate fucking cabins in the woods. Give me the creeps. Did you ever see that movie? How did Elliot's brother Julian die? Sargon asked. Quick sipped his coffee and looked away. Without feeling, he said, cut to pieces. They used a serrated knife so it would hurt more. Elliot had to watch. He was tied up. We found him in a warehouse on Delancey Street screaming because wild dogs were eating the body parts. He never got over that. I've never seen him smile once. The reason he respects us now is that when he needed something, we gave it to him. We saved what was left of Julian for proper burial. We didn't just let the dogs eat the rest. It's important for them Christians, get this. They believe that the body rises up after death and flies to heaven. Wouldn't that be nice? Not so nice for Julian because part of him came up as dog shit in the park. Forcing himself to focus, Sargon said, I have a favor to ask. As they left the counter and walked up the steep, dimly lit stairs, 2 floors straight up to Julian's pool hall. Uh-oh, said quick, winded. I need an apartment. So look in the paper. I'm 15. I need an adult. You live in a Fifth Avenue mansion. Your pals live in that high rise. What the fuck do you need an apartment for? I live in one. Believe me, it ain't special. It's for a friend who needs to hide out. He needs somewhere safe and clean, but small and cheap. Safe, clean, small, cheap? What city do you think you're living in? How about small and cheap? Small's no problem. Let's see where that gets us. What neighborhood? He took his nightstick and rapped 3 times on the door. A vacuum cleaner whined back and forth. They waited. He rapped 3 times again. The peephole popped open. Downtown's best, Sargon said. Very popular place to live. Harlem would be easier. I know a landlord there. Downtown's better. He scratched his gray hair and rubbed the white stubble on his florid cheek as they pushed past the janitor. Landlords down here are scumbags. It was a large, dark loft with 24 tables and a horseshoe bar in the middle. There were no distractions save the grimy view of Broadway through windows and metal Venetian blinds that had never been cleaned. Elliot was a spare man with a hard mouth, slight of build. He sat with a calculator, peering through reading glasses at a sheet of copper electroweave. A short clay pipe sat smoldering in an ashtray next to a discolored mug of coffee and a rocks glass of whiskey. He didn't look up, but said, "I stood up to you last week." Quick raised the nightstick above his head and brought it down on the bar hard. "Fucking roach, don't insult me." "What?" he asked, pushing the glasses up his nose and drinking the shot of whiskey. "You know what? The heroin, the machines. The machines, I bumped for that." Quick smirked and shook his finger. "Not the new ones. I know you added 3 slots in a poker. Plus, the dope you're running is worth $1,000 every 2 weeks. Otherwise, I'll shut your ass down." "Come on, Quick, we're friends. I gotta make a living. You take $1,000 more and I'm fucked. I can't pay Lawrence here. He's got a family. I can't, I got debts. You think Martini's gonna give a crap about my expenses? He wants the thing on time. So do I. It's impossible." Quick said, "Don't make me look bad in front of the kid." Elliot said, "The kid? He makes more than I do off of this place with his stick. Shake his ass down. My next move is to send the red suits in." "Balls busted. Fuck me. I thought we were friends." "We are friends. That'll be $1,000. I don't weigh my pockets down with silver." Elliot shook his head, yawned, and drank the rest of the coffee before descending the stairs to the basement, returning with 2 diamonds and a cellophane bag. "Motherfucker, my margin just shrank to Bupkis. That's a pile of goat shit and you know it. I'll tell you what, you can skip a week if you do my partner a solid." Elliot looked at Sargon with brief but evident affection. "Sure, what's the kid want?" "A safe, clean, small, cheap apartment downtown." Elliot laughed for the first time in 20 years. "Get out of here. I don't want to see you two for 2 weeks unless you're renting a bucket of balls."
And then number 12. Yeah. In the middle. Rhea, everybody. Right. Now we're going to select Mark and another musician. Okay, so that's Mark. And let's spin again and let's see who the nose gets. And I would say Eric. Close to Eric, right?
Can you hear me?
What?
Can you hear me? Hi, I'm Eric Brooks. It's called false indigo. Expanding exponentially, the plant fills the Army recruiting center until the girders strain against its growth. The window onto the high street shatters, spilling curlicues of vine. Bodies of a staff sergeant and a private carried with them, wrapped up like snake's prey, skewered, thickening tendrils. People on the street are toppled, cut by glass, knocked aside as leaves, broad as bed sheets, unfurl to soak up the light. The vines helix around new bodies, so tight some burst. The right front girder of the recruitment building buckles and the structure slumps like a drunk, compressing the plant matter still in the office. The left girder blows free from the grip of its bolts and into the street, slicing a carriage neatly in half. The horses bolt, and the front half of the carriage careens forward, leaving passengers inside exposed, bloody. Bystanders flee and panic. Nubs, the size of human heads, bud along the length of every vine. And in a fireworks burst of dazzling yellow and carmine and orange, 100 flowers bloom. Impossible colors are born in the street below. And Khaled's mind flees to the moment he knew he had to leave the city where he was born. He was 13, the last year of childhood in Mirror, the age all children are taken to Glass House to find out who they'll be. Before entering, they're fated by their family with a huge meal, a menu they choose themselves. No request can be denied, no expense spared. Khaled could have asked for steak and he would have gotten it. But people remember what you asked for as your meal before Glass House. They remember and speculate about the implications of who you will become. The ones who ask for rare fruits or elaborate cakes get side-eyed the rest of their lives. Khaled asked for monkfish and greens with a side of fried garlic. Beyond his family's normal means, but no extravagance. The bitter taste of the greens clung to his tongue as he chose a small black box from the shelf, identical to hundreds of others, and stepped into the Glass House. The door shut behind him, killing the last of the light. Khaled knew to open the box. What was inside would aid him. It contained a butane lighter, steel rectangle carved with symbols he could feel with his fingers. He was about to flick it open for a flame to guide him, but he decided to wait. He felt his way along the smooth glass walls, guided at turns by intuition, until he came to a room too big to fit in Glass House as viewed from outside. He fumbled along the walls, a geometric shape, so many sides its surface approached circularity. He couldn't find the door, even the door he'd entered through, and he flicked the lighter open. The flame blinded him in the pitch black. He saw the room as it was, a dome of mirrors, not as big as he assumed, but close, as if it had shrunk down and was about to swallow him. Even the floor was mirrored, tiny mounds of raised, angled mirrors underfoot. The reflection of the flame burned in every facet of the room, each reflecting every other. The floor lit up, disappearing under him until he was surrounded by tiny flames. He tried to shut the lighter, but the lid stuck. He tried to blow out the flame, but it refused to waver. He threw the lighter, and it skidded across the mirrored floor. The flames in the firmament danced violently before settling again. Khaled sat on the ground and cried, tears refracting the flames, another multiplier as their number approached infinity. He covered his eyes, sobbing, and the afterimage burned and juddered on the inside of his eyelids until his brain shut down and he passed out. 2 days later, his mother asked him what he saw. All the stars, he said. She cried. His mother, who wasn't given to emotion. I'm sorry, she said, and walked out. Khaled thought about what she'd said. His first thought was his vision meant he had a destiny and his mother wished his cup would be passed from him. The more he turned the words over in his fever-singed brain, the more convinced he became that his mother's words were an apology for something she'd done. He thought about his vision, the impossible multiplication of flames in the room. Khaled was no genius when it came to optics. One teacher informed his parents that for him, science would be a hobby rather than a career path. But he knew the limits of what effects it could produce. He remembered the bitter taste the greens left on his tongue, inorganic and coppery. He'd been drugged. His mother, adherent to a culture in which intoxication was forbidden, had put something in his food before sending him to face his trial. If they did it to him, they did it to everyone, every child in Mirror. He thought about older kids he never saw after they went into Glass House, and how close his mind had come to snapping. He could never be entirely sure it hadn't. And he understood his parents knew and accepted the risks. He wondered how many were lost and decided it didn't matter. One was too many. The next day, he told his parents he would dedicate the next 4 years to studying for the scholarship exam. They listed exceptions, demands on his time from family obligations to community activities he used to love. And for each one he said, that's not for me anymore. Until his mother nodded and the conversation was over. Khaled knows less about botanics than he knew about optics. But watching colors bleed off the edges of flowers in the street, perfuming the air with wild hues, he knows for the second time in his life he's been drugged. Bittersweet, he thought, when he didn't cookie, remembering a faculty dinner where the host served inedible chocolate with no aspect of sweetness in it, and assured Khaled that this was what good chocolate tasted like. He doesn't have the luxury of reflecting on it. Flocks, his tether, doorway, one chance, races out of the room, and the only option is to go after her. There can't be a reckoning later, the kind of conversation he never had with his mother about what she did and what it meant. He's in the street, a riot of green amplified by the psychedelics in his system. The vines are intricate architecture, the perception of patterns flails across his consciousness and away the edge of a song, out of earshot. Hear a blossom. There, a body hanging off of branches and tendrils, and Khaled's mind can only see the beauty in each. Vivid colors of petals. His lost flocks and tries to find her by listening for rustling leaves, snapping branches, but the plant is growing slowly now. It's busy, of course, but it moves and expands. He closes his eyes and tries to focus when he opens them. If he can narrow the aperture, he can make everything clear. A hole, he decides, and open it. He opens his eyes and colors flare and breathe at the periphery of his vision, but he sees a gap in the snarl big enough to fit through. In the absence of any others, he decides it's the way that Phlox went. Where was the door I came through in Glass House? Part of his mind screams, insisting this is the problem to be dealt with. What happened to the entrance? Where was the door? On hands and knees, he wends through the tunnel. No sense of whether he's closer to the entrance or the exit. Where was the door? When shafts of light make their way through the growth above him, he feels light lift him out. Beams embracing him and rapturing him skyward. The thought shatters at the sight of a leg, body absent, sprung in a web of rootlets. The tunnel is widening enough. He can move on his feet, provided he stays hunched. The word aperture flows through his brain, unmoored to context, as the tunnel opens into daylight, cobble streets and ironwork buildings forming canyon walls on either side. In the middle of the space, Phlox stands, facing the massive plant. This is faith rewarded, Khaled thinks. Although he can't say faith in what. What happened, he asks her. She turns her attention to him, the first time she's seen him as a human being rather than a tourist, a thought experiment. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out what looks like 3 acorns. You have to decide if you're going or staying, she says. It's not fair because... She pauses, and Khaled wants to finish her sentence with, because I non-consensually drugged you to the eyeballs. If you want to get out, I can get you out, she says. Once you're out, you can't come back. This city, the way it is, won't be here anymore. Stay and watch it what it becomes. Or come back when it's something else. If the changes don't destroy us. A pivot in her language from it to us. The city isn't iron buildings and cobblestone streets. It's Phlox and everyone like her. It could be him too. You have to choose. You have to decide now. Khaled looks at the growth. It sings to the drugs that are in him. Beautiful, beautiful, as if it can make him forget the bodies embedded in it. He thinks about his wife and his children. It would be easier if he knew that they were safe. Beyond this point, knowing things is no longer an option. Beyond this point, he sees thin lines carved in the acorns and Phlox's palms. And they tell the drugs in him, there was one like this at the center of the plant. She's offering it to him. Another drugged cookie, another laced last meal, a wooden box that holds infinite stars. Khaled reaches out and takes what's offered. Phlox nods. An echo of his mother's long ago apology. You grew up in Europe, she says. He nods. Light leaps from the college in the acorn. You know 3 Corners? 3 Corners was the station he departed from when he left the university, checking the platform to see if his parents decided to see him off. They hadn't. Colette nods. Put this near the terminal, says Phlox. Lift up a paving stone and put it underneath. You'll have to be careful. It'll take the cops a while to understand what's happening, but they'll be looking for anything suspicious. If you think you're about to be caught, drop it wherever you can. Do not get caught with it. Will it kill people? No, says Phlox. No, I don't know. This seed gestures that the all-consuming plant behind him is not tainted. I'll be more careful next time. This one shouldn't be as aggressive. Shouldn't isn't won't, thinks Khaled. He encloses the seed in his fist and nods. Meet me in the market as soon as you can. Well, what if I can't get there? He asks. If you can't get there, it's all fucked, and I'm dead or in a gulag, says Phlox. Well, how will I know what happens to you? You won't, says Phlox. We have to embrace not knowing. 3 corners, under the paving stone. Don't get caught. With a clarity of purpose and adrenaline levels augmented by drugs, Khaled leaps into the hole from which he emerged, searching for paths that open to the south. He comes to a clearing big enough to stand as if a bubble held back the vines here, and then popped. As big, he thinks, as the domed room in the glass house. Rather than dredging up memories, it invites possibility. Hadn't he had a vision? Hadn't the light burned away something in him and left him changed? He looks around in space, seeking a new vision, a confirmation that he's on the right path. What he finds is a body, suspended in the foliage above him. It's a man his size, head absent. Thank you, Khaled thinks, into the empty space left behind when he abandoned his faith. Thank you. He thinks about his wife, his children, and the cloud of unknowing. He believes they're alive, safe in her brother's house in North Wedge, children playing tag on the lawn while the adults sip wine and wonder when he's coming back. He strips off his clothes, the blue linen shirt his wife bought him for his dissertation defense, the pants he brought on this trip because they showed the most wear, the shoes he'd stayed up all night scuffing with a wire brush so they no longer shout at newness. Naked, he climbs into the tangle and undresses the man in the vines. At first, delicately, respectfully. The man's legs are blessedly straight, hanging from the branches like strange fruit, and the pants come free easily. When this proves too difficult, he yanks and tears, dressing the suspended man who's tougher. In the end, the man looks like he passed out, attempting to undress. Suspicious. There will be too many bodies for one to warrant further investigation. He stuffs his sanctuary papers in the back pocket of the pants, along with the corresponding identification. Last, he removes his wedding ring, an amulet of black glass ordered from a craftsman in Europe. He was shocked when she presented it to him at the wedding, as if a ghost of his past life had shown up. His parents had declined the invitation. He slips the ring onto the dead man's finger, pushing against cooling flesh to get it over the knuckle. Satisfied, he dresses himself in the dead man's clothes, the blood-spattered pants, torn workshop work shirt. He picks up the acorn he had set down in a patch of dirt, worried it would quicken into another network of vines. He turns around to orient himself and sees there's one way out of the clearing, not the way he came in. Nameless, pulled forward by purpose that resembles fate, he goes south.
Bob Proel.
Wait just a second. Okay. Yeah.
Even out a little bit. Becky landed this one rescue.
All right, I'm Becky Rhian, and this is 7 Pages by Leslie Daniels. Are 3 unrelated pieces. If you can find a connection, please tell me. When my sister Valerie and I were in our tough 20s, both living in Manhattan, we saw the same therapist, a man whose portrait now hangs in the therapy hall of wax. He said one memorable thing. He said that my sister and I had the same unconscious. He also said this to me over and over with what sounded to my ears like deep admiration. You're a terrible bitch. I hope he actually thought so, and it was not some ridiculous manipulation. The therapist held a group on Monday nights. In addition to individual therapy, my sister and I were in each one of his groups on alternating Mondays. He had a rule. Talking about the group outside of the group was betrayal. We broke that rule. My sister and I discussed everything about our respective groups. We discovered that members of her group were married to members of my group. My group had mostly husbands, plus a maidenly lady from Queens, on whom the therapist doted. Every session, he would urge her to speak. With his ardent prompting, every other Monday, she'd squeeze out one instantly forgettable kernel of pith. In my sister's group, the lone husband complained about how hairy his wife was. He never wanted to have sex with her. My sister asked me if the lady from Queens was hairy, and I said she was. Armpits to sideburns. In my group, the dentist complained about his wife spending his money. In Valerie's group was his sexy wife. The dentist said he'd married the best looking woman he could afford. She was like a prostitute to him. I told him that he was his wife's trick, or John, which happened to be his name. The therapist did not say I was a terrible bitch, but I could hear him thinking it. Valerie, an artist, despised the art in our therapist's office. She called it Israel tourist art. A trite brass bird was perched on the shelf behind the couch. My sister left a half-eaten cookie under its beak. Look for it, she said. On my next session, the cookie was still there, arm lengths from the couch where I refused to lie down. While the therapist talked, saying his boring and obvious things, fruitlessly begging me to tell him my sex fantasies, I reached for that stale cookie, took a bite, and put it back into the cookie. He didn't notice. After 2 years, I told him I wanted to leave. He told me the car in my dreams was symbolic of our therapy. I began to dream of cars with square wheels and headless drivers, stuck cars, cars that smelled bad. My dreams had smelled back then. He didn't want me to go. What do you want to fix about me? I asked him repeatedly. He couldn't name anything. I left. My sister left. Not in that order. My sister helped me leave that ineffectual shrink, that stalled car on the dead-end street. For months following my exit, on alternate Mondays, I sent anonymous Domino's pizza to my old therapy group. I relished the moment on the phone of choosing the toppings. Multiple and varied pizzas were delivered to the therapist's office at 7:30 p.m., late enough so that John the dentist, John the John, would have started his whining. Late enough so that the hairy lady would have said her one empty head. In fiction, I haven't used sending revenge pieces to your ex-therapist, but it illustrates character well. The young woman is pissed, powerless, and this is key. She will do anything to make her sister laugh. Story 2, editing. The Skunk Patrol. Writing is a life of playing the shame game. To your deep humiliation, in your words, you meet yourself over and over again. Editing is the best and also the worst part. Through editing, you try to remove the most hideous of your faults. The second day of the editing is harder than the first. You miss the fun of discovery, of invention. The first day was a novelty, the funny, clever day of showing up, getting your uniform and name tag, key card to the tool shed. Day 2, you put on your uniform at home, ride the bus wearing the ugly black tunic, announcing you to fellow passengers as someone who doesn't work with ideas. You arrive, hang your name tag around your neck, use the key card to get a shovel. Face mask? Check. You're one of the dead skunk collectors' go-to. On the first break, you wash your hands, rethink your life choices. Break 2, wash hands, rethink life choices. Each step. Break 3, wash hands, use bathroom, wash hands again. No one is saying, aren't you clever? Instead, they ask if yours are regulation pants. Observation from day 2. Sometimes it's just skunk scat. Day 3, you still have the wrong pants. You pick up your shovel and dab perfume under your nose. Your coworkers snigger. They bring Limburger cheese sandwiches for lunch, kimchi, tuna fish with pickles. No one shares. after lunch, instead of thinking about yourself, you're actually doing the editing work. Headlamp strapped in place, wrong pants, filthy. You realize that they're your dead stumps. You made them. Tenderness arises around yourself. Your eyes water. It's not the smell, or it might be. You tell yourself you're learning things about editing, about yourself. You note the horrors of fussy language. You note how you protect your central character from emotional impact. Lay it bare, you tell yourself. Trust the big magic, turning your heart inside out. It's raining on day 4 of this Gat skunk editing patrol. You know on the back stretch behind the zebras is where you must go. It'll be awful. You question whether you are toting these carcasses to the lab, the coroners. Note that you picked animals that are black and white. Zebras, skunks, but dead things are not black and white. Nothing dead is black and white, and neither is editing. Wade in, because now you must begin the wet work. It's raining hard when you enter the swamp. They've got to issue you a raincoat. You borrowed one that's too small, it chafes under your arms. When you bend over to shovel, your ass gets wet. You want this to be over. It's not the smell, you tell yourself, not the conditions either, though they could be better. It's not even that these disgusting things are the product of your own brain. It's all the decisions. Next one is called Tiny Man Dream. My first thought on waking up was, thank goodness I'm not in therapy. Or maybe it was too bad I'm not in therapy because there's no one to tell this dream to. It's not that I don't want insight, but a therapist would seize on a dream like this as if it were a ticket to the meaning party. The dream had a very small man dressed in a maroon button-down shirt and blue pants, worn leather belt, perhaps glasses, fair hair, professing his love for me. His clothing, as I think about it, doesn't signify anything strongly. Here's a man who is neat and who is not stylish. He had a nice enough body if you consider someone who is 8 inches tall to have a physique. He dressed the way a nice man dresses on a Saturday, not to impress, but for neatness. And should anything happen to these clothes while he was, say, cleaning out the garage, it wouldn't matter much. Unless those were his best clothes, in which case he must have been somewhat poor, or at least clueless. You could buy those clothes at any Goodwill store in any county, any day of the year. If you wanted clothes that would not get you a table at a top restaurant, clothes that would not get you remembered anywhere, that maroon shirt and those blue pants, not maybe, but a wronger blue, would do the trick. The hair too, fair, but not ginger, neatly combed to the side in a style that worked in Kansas in the 50s and may still. It was kind of a don't look at me, or at least don't let your eyes linger style. And yet he was boldly, madly in love with me. Not exactly madly, because someone with such careful appearance would not let him go, not let himself go wild. But he was sincerely, deeply desirous of me. I listened to the tiny man's protestations of love and desire, and I feel that I am, in this dream anyway, worthy of love and desire. I consider his size. I consider fulfilling his desire. How did that go? I considered cramming him inside of me. Would he even survive that? Feet first? The glasses. At this point, the therapist would have come to their conclusion. which would have missed the most important aspect of how kind I am being in my dream, how considerate of the tiny man's welfare. Would he smother in my vagina? The therapist, who by now would have been listening to my crap for at least 6 months, would head down the path of, well, at least she's willing to fuck somebody. Or maybe the other path of, her ambivalence towards intimacy has given her a manageable target of a mildly handsome man with a penis the size of a pin. Someone she can dominate. Thank you, I would say to them for the insights. But I'm worried about the tiny man's welfare. Plus, I would never put a fully clothed person inside my vagina. Nor do I have any desire to take those tiny clothes off of him. But here's the part that I would not want to have to explain to my therapist. I take seriously his desire for me. His desire is something I could fulfill. Why I feel I should fulfill it is something that I will never understand, awake or asleep. Maybe, sadly, this is who I am. A person deeply influenced by what others want from her, even people in her dreams, people barely taller than a new pencil. At this point, the therapist would ask me, what is the tiny man saying to you? But I'm unable to summon up his words, though I note that his voice doesn't have the indignity of squeakiness commensurate with his size. Nor can I imagine what he could be saying to convince me, a full-size woman, to continence his suit. So I don't. Which is the freedom of not being in therapy. Only now I don't know what is the thing that could be said that would convince me that I am loved. I decide whether from my own perverse interest or from true kindness to fulfill his desire. Without undressing him, I rub the tip of my forefinger along the fly of his blue pants, very lightly, back and forth, in a way that may satisfy and yet not, it won't hurt his tiny self. He doesn't stop talking, but his tiny face flushes badly. In my dream, I don't worry about him messing his blue pants, nor do I think about my own pleasure. To be honest, and therapists make a big deal about honesty. Maybe I think about both of those things. He's liable to come in those tidy little pants, and no way will it ever be my turn. Yet, in my dream, as in my waking life, I do this thing because it is a generous solution to a ridiculous situation.
Let's go again. Volunteer spinner? Thank you very much. Thank you for coming. Wait, everybody? And then there were nine. Okay, there we go. Flag, Sarah and.
Me.
Okay, Sarah and.
Unless you want.
Now we go with the rest. Thank
Wonderful. Excellent. You tell me when you're ready. Ronald Reagan is on TV. March 1987. Ronald Reagan is on TV. I sit on the couch with Mom while Dad stands behind us, still in his chef uniform. He's holding his white hat in his hands. The president sits at his desk in the Oval Office, shuffling a couple of papers around. I study his face, the tilt of his head, the furrows in his glossy hair. He takes a breath and begins. A few months ago, I told the American people I did not trade arms for hostages. My heart and my best intentions tell me it's true, but the facts and the evidence all tell me it is not. I'm 10 years old and I'm confused. I'm pretty sure this means the president lied. I don't know what to make of him. I don't know what to make of any of this. On the news and at school, I've been hearing about how some powerful men in our government sent weapons to Iran in exchange for their help freeing Americans who'd been taken hostage. Then they used the money they made selling weapons to Iran and secretly got involved in a war in Nicaragua. Now these men keep changing their story and either say they don't recall that it wasn't as bad as it seems, or that the results of their actions are more important than what they did. Up until now, I believe that adults usually try to do the right thing and were basically doing their best to be good and honest. I thought you could count on them to tell the truth. Believing this made me feel safer in the world. But now it seems that the people in charge of the country, even the president, are either lying or just don't know what they're doing. It's a scary thought. At home, things are changing too, and that's scary in another way. A few months ago, my parents called a family meeting to tell us that they are separating and that Dad will be moving out at some point in the not so distant future. Even though I'm a kid, I know it probably means divorce. My parents fight a lot, so I don't have much hope they'll work it out. I doubt they do either. Maybe they're trying to protect us and just can't bring themselves to tell us it's over. Maybe they don't know that yet, and they're trying to protect themselves too. Either way, I know they aren't telling the whole truth. It makes me anxious to know something's wrong and that I can't do anything to fix it. I'm anxious a lot these days. Ronald Reagan is still on TV. He looks directly into the camera and says, "Now, what should happen when you make a mistake is this. You take your knocks, you learn your lessons, and then you move on." He makes it sound simple, but maybe it's not. Moving on sounds good, but how do you do that when you stop trusting someone? In the kitchen, Mom bangs dishes around while Dad wrestles with brother and sister. They run at him as fast as they can, jumping and tackling him when they get close. I sit on the couch and imagine what it will be like when my dad moves out and my mom gets a full-time job. She's thinking about selling houses. I fantasize about becoming a latchkey kid with a hot pink spiral future. I'll walk my brother and sister home from school and help them with their homework. I'll make a snack for us and wash the dishes when we're done. September 1987. I'm nearly 11, and I've just started babysitting for my next door neighbor. Her name is Katie too, but we all call her Baby Kate. She's 3 years younger than me, and that's a lot at this age. I watch her for the first time this afternoon, right after school for a couple of hours. I love babysitting because it helps me feel brave and responsible, and that's what I want to be. I can't wait to be an adult. I imagine it might be this way all the time. The sunlight is pouring into the Goldman's kitchen window, and I'm wiping down the counter, doing my best to show everyone how mature I am. So they'll let me do this again. It's time for the news. I watch it because I think that's the adult thing to do. Dan Rather is talking about Iran again. This time it's a story about their war with a country I've never heard of before, Iraq. I see images of men in tan uniforms crouching behind boulders, firing big guns. And I think it's sad they're fighting since their names are only one letter different. Iran, Iraq, their family. It's sad when families fight. But my family fights. And Katie's does too. Our dads have recently moved out of our mom's house and have gotten an apartment together. Katie and I were curious about their place and begged them to take us to see it. I thought it would be fun, like some sort of sitcom. Two soon-to-be divorced dads and their kids. There would be ice cream and gold necklaces with heart-shaped lockets. There would be sunlight. Maybe the living room would smell like semen. But it wasn't like that at all. The air felt heavy there. There's a makeshift bed where my dad was supposed to sleep, and a tangle of sheets and blankets on a shabby wood floor. As soon as I saw that, I felt sad and wanted to go home. Before long, Katie's dad will want to go home too, and he'll move back in the next door. What my dad wants, I'm not sure, but he'll still spend most nights on our living room couch. January 1991. I'm 14 years old, and I'm having dinner with my friend, Lauren. Her mom usually has no TV policy, but tonight the news is on. We're waiting for the first war of our lives to begin. Dan Rather is on TV. He says, how long these airstrikes last and to what extent they're being conducted is one of the mysteries of the moment as the fog of war begins to descend on Iraq, Kuwait, the Persian Gulf, and that whole area. In not too long, the camera will shake, and in the distance, we'll hear the rumbly thunder of explosions, and just like that, we're at war. In the next 3 weeks, I see images of war on television. The way it's filmed, it looks like a video game. Rockets exploding against the dark sky, everything cast with this greenish hue that makes it hard to see exactly what's going on. I'm old enough to wonder if it's being deliberately presented that way to make it seem less real and dangerous. At night, I lie in bed and look up at my ceiling covered in glow-in-the-dark stars. And I think of the sky and imagine bombs dropping from above here in Iraq. One morning, soon after the war begins, I walk to the front doors of my high school and find a group of kids sitting in a circle on the floor protesting the war. They're dressed in black and holding white candles. I make my way into the circle and sit down, and someone starts to sing in a slightly shaky voice. All we are saying is give peace a chance. It's the only protest song we know. And even if it's obvious, it says everything we want to say. The circle keeps growing and the song gets louder and louder. At one point, I turn around and see a newscaster standing by, waiting to interview us. We're being recorded. I close my eyes. Over and over again, we sing the words to that song. All we are saying is give peace a chance. We aren't pretending. We are 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, and we mean it. And then I'll be 18. I will be 25. I will be 32. I will be 40. The same age as my parents, when they told me they were separating. I will try to be the adult I imagined, someone who keeps her promises and does her best, but sometimes I'll make mistakes. I'll struggle to be honest with others and with myself. And when I catch myself or get caught by someone else, I'll take responsibility, learn from it, and try to move on. But it won't always be that simple. And I'll sit on the couch in my living room, turn on the TV, and see the president behind his desk in the Oval Office or standing on the White House steps. There he is, in front of flags or behind a podium. Or he'll testify before Congress and he'll say, I do not recall, or I have no knowledge of that, or I did not have sexual relations with that woman. He will say things about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He will say, yes, we can. We will say, we did what we had to do, but the cost of doing nothing was greater than the risk he took. And then we'll be at war with Iraq, with Afghanistan, and with one another. And the president will say, it's a witch hunt, it's a hoax. He will say that the coronavirus will just go away. And after losing the election, he will say it was rigged, it was stolen. And his supporters will believe him and mount an insurrection at the Capitol to try to keep him in the office. They will say they are there to take their country back. I will see them on TV in their red hats and camo and crosses. They will smash windows, push their way inside, threaten guards and the government. And it will be all at once, like something I've never seen before. And somehow, all just the same. Katie Marks.
That was Scott Whitham, Sarah Smallin, to Katie Marks. Melanie and Jaws, pretty clear. Very good. Okay.
Prior Futures, Chapter 15. Prior decides to spend his day trying to locate some old friends, allies who might still be alive and can help him make sense of this world. He starts with Brewster, trying to remember where that crazy hippie activist lived. He'll search for Professor Belden later. If not today, maybe tomorrow. Belden was always more malleable and slippery than Brewster. Fryer hits the streets and finally recalls the route. It takes the better part of the morning. He keeps a lookout for Addison, making sure he isn't being tailed. Brewster Street is narrow and quiet. Old stone houses bunched together a century ago when the city was worried about being too crowded with fully fleshed people, lined each side of the street. Prior approaches the foot of Brewster's driveway, thinking of what he's going to say to his old friend. He's put aside the fringe underground movement for the moment. The idea that Latrende and Antoine might be connected by common cause is too vast a notion to contemplate at the moment. He'll deal with all that later. Right now, Brewster's light is on, and he needs the good doctor's help. He hopes Brewster has survived by his wits. Brewster was already a legendary chemist who railed against nanogov when it first formed. For a while, he was known as something of a revolutionary, an anti-nano terrorist who helped organize the fringe in their struggle. He begged Prior to stay and help him, but by then, Damon was dead, police had left, and Prior was on the last boat to Antigua. Brewster had always been an invaluable resource to Prior, helping him with DNA evidence and other forensics to identify ownership of rare antiques. Brewster liked solving history's riddles. Bring clarity to chaos and you'll never be out of a job, Brewster was often fond of saying. Prior is about to give Brewster's door a knock when he hears shuffling footsteps inside. "It cannot be," says a gargled voice from behind the door. "It is, man," says another muffled voice. "Brewster," says Prior, "it's me, Jeremiah." "Go away," says the gargled voice from behind the door. "Come on in," says the muffled voice. The door swings open. The foyer is dimly lit, and the musty smell of mold and rotting wood is thick in the air. Prior steps inside before the door is closed. "All right, who the hell is," says Prior. He takes a step forward to get a better look at the couple hiding from him. He is confronted with two faces growing out of two long necks. One of the faces is an older version of Brewster, slightly wrinkled, graying more around the temples. Ponytail still in place, maybe a bit longer. He wears granny glasses like one of his old idols. His spherical face bobs up and down on his inhumanly long neck, like a tulip bulb in the wind. The other face is flatter, more severe. It's a version of Brewster the way Prior remembers him. He is young, vibrant, still with a ponytail, and slight gray around the temples to indicate some sort of wisdom. But the joy has been washed out, leaving behind a void, an almost sinister anger and hopelessness. The flat face bobs away slightly, its neck tapering delicately as it gets closer to the face. And Prior sees clearly that the second head is two-dimensional. It reminds him of an old developing photograph dangling on a wire. Both neck stalks convene like rivers in the three-dimensional body of Brewster. Prior takes a step back, but he's up against a dank wall. "Don't be afraid, man," says 3D Brewster, the left-sided head. His spherical face draws closer to Prior, the neck elongating to allow a more thorough inspection. "He is not wanted here," says 2D Brewster. His paper plate face retracts. "He smells of fringe. Disgusting. I will not stand for this infestation." "Brewster, what did they do to you?" "It's cool. Come on in, Jer. Let's hang in the lab where the light's better," says 3D Brewster. He points the way, and Prior proceeds down the hallway into a lit opening, keeping an eye on both faces. Behind him, he hears 2D Brewster complaining. "He's not with us. He seeks to ruin. Maud will not stand for this." "You're harshing the room, dude," says 3D Brewster. Brewster's lab is exactly as Prior remembers it. Prior spent many nights trying to decipher clues with Brewster about the origins of Etruscan vases, Monet paintings, Indian arrowheads, vacuum cleaners, whatever was trendy with the collectors at that time. 3 black lab tables are set up in parallel, each lined with glass tubes, beakers, crude scales, and wooden bowls. On the wall are blackboards, each filled with unreadable chalk scrawls of gibberish in every color available. Words are circled multiple times and arrows point in dramatic arcs from one point to another. The curtainless window is stained with a brown scum. You used to be tidier, says Pryor. He's trying to figure out how to approach this. Brewster positions himself in front of the window, his smeared reflection creating the illusion of two additional heads, like a nightmare Medusa. I've had difficulty focusing lately, says 3D Brewster. 2D Brewster faces away, looking out the window. Maud, they're still after me, everywhere, listening. 2D Brewster's head whips around and conks 3D Brewster, knocking 3D Brewster's head away. It makes it sound like two coconuts. Ah, this is treason, says 2D Brewster. Call the Mod police. Nano, go! Get this fringe, this murderer out of my sight. Does not serve us. Brewster's body, which is normal below the neck, from what Pryor can tell, moves forward slightly. Brewster's right hand reaches for a small vial on the lab bench. He flips off the cork stopper with his thumb. Brewster's left hand grabs the vial, fighting him for temporary control of his body. With practiced grace, Brewster's right arm shakes loose his left arm and brings the vial to his 3D mouth. Brewster drinks the vial's purple liquid like a tequila shot. Emitting a low growl, 2D Brewster's head expands in its square footage and wraps itself around the 3D head, hoping to force the liquid to come sloshing out of his mouth. Plastic wrap trying to suffocate a grapefruit, but it's too late. 3D Brewster has swallowed whatever was in the vial. I will report this insolence, says 2D Brewster. You can never, but that's all 2D Brewster gets out. His neck shrinks at the collarbone like a decaying vine until it snaps off from Brewster's body. The detached 2D head and neck string begin to float freely through the air like a lost circus balloon. Sorry, you have to see this, says 3D Brewster, whose own neck has begun to take on the dimensions and location of a fringe neck. Brewster takes the floating neck string and flings it toward his mouth. In one practice move, he swallows the detached 2D Brewster head like a fruit roll-up. Apologies, strictly necessary, says Brewster, as if he accidentally belched in proper company. All right, says Brewster's Pryor, trying not to make eye contact. And disagreeably temporary. That crotchety dude will be back shortly. What the hell, Brewster? Pryor thought about Brewster often when he was in Antigua. He hoped, as had many, that Brewster was the key to fighting the system and turning it back to the people. Now, it looks like he can't even control his own body, like he suffered the ultimate home invasion. Despite what you must think, says Brewster, sitting down in an old chair, no one did this to me. Experiments and science, Jer. It's what got us into this mess. That damn fairy. Good riddance, I say. Science will get us out of this, man. You did this to yourself. Looking for a cure. Now, obviously, I'm more motivated than ever. You see, I'm in constant pain and in fear that my mod self will eventually pause from thinking about himself long enough to realize it's simple to completely take over the rest of me. And here I was looking for your help. What can I do? Said Pryor. Should have stayed in Antigua where it was safe. Yeah, about that. Better make it quick, says Brewster. Our moon-faced friend is an impatient tenant. I can already feel him starting to bubble up. Jesus, Brewster, I'm so sorry. Empathy is in short supply around here, Jer. It's refreshing to hear. I need to clear my name, says Pryor, more nakedly than he cares to. People still think, the sanctity of your reputation. I guess things haven't changed all that much, have they, man? Machende said you helped him with the disguise so he could look like a fringe. I need to get into mod police headquarters. Was wondering if you could outfit me with something. Brewster stands up, adjusts his lab coat, and shuffles over to his blackboard of mumbo jumbo. He stares at it, his eyes tracing the arrows and circled words. That's a lot of information you've divulged. A fringe could get into serious trouble and pain if Maud found out what he was up to, says Brewster, his back to Pryor. Pryor spies the exit and thinks he can make the lab door before Brewster can reach him. Worst case scenario, Pryor could jump out the window, although he's not looking forward to crashing through the thick glass. Sorry to have wasted your time, says Pryor, slowly advancing toward the exit. Don't be ridiculous, says Brewster, turning around. He's still 3D Brewster, and Pryor finds it odd that this sight is comforting. I'm just asking you to be careful. Also, this never gets traced back to me. Brewster opens a drawer in one of his desks, reaches in, and throws Pryor a small packet. Pryor looks inside the open packet, a stick of gum. For trucking in, says Brewster. Thanks, pal. What can I do for you? Says Pryor. Go back to Antigua for starters, says Brewster. There's a pained look on his face. He holds his stomach, looking sicker by the second. My roommate is pulling up to the driveway. He's gonna crash here soon. I can't leave you like this. Careful, Jer. You don't know. There's a gathering, a threat, more horrible. Brewster doubles over and crashes onto his knees. Brewster, go, says Brewster, his voice muffled, his neck already shifting over, elongated, making room for 2D Brewster. Pryor runs to the exit. Behind him, he hears 2D Brewster growl. Hey, Pryor, tell police and Molly I say hello. Pryor Futures by Dan Kopcow.
How do we make a circle of 4 people? We make a sort of.
There we go. Now we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Hit it.
Here we go.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Okay. This is untitled as yet.
Above my desk hangs a framed cover of the New York Times Magazine, the one with my face on it. My face is in profile, that is, turned and looking over my naked shoulder into the half distance. The light is soft, but it illuminates my eye, the one you can see, in a very strange and glassy way. The hairstylist before the photo shoot did something miraculous with my hair, and instead of poofing out in its usual wiry frizz, it flows back from my face in soft, heavy waves. The lighting managed to catch every little wrinkle and throw it into relief You can make out every freckle on my shoulder and every stray eyebrow hair. You think they'd airbrush these things out, but oh well. The photograph is beautiful in spite of, because of, little flaws. And I still suck my breath in astonishment every time I look at it. It's the only piece of art I brought to the shore. The photographer, the famous Sandra Parkhurst, plied me with glass after glass of sweet sherry. Otherwise, I couldn't have imagined taking my glass off from camera. The words along the bottom are his widow, an intimate portrait. Inside the magazine was a feature article about me and more pictures, these taken at our upstate country house. I showed the reporter around the grounds, inside the dilapidated barn that featured so prominently in Sebastian's Patience of the Minotaur. The wall of family pictures, so many of his mother, along the staircase. A melancholy view of his abandoned but untouched study, with the multiple stacks of books on the desk and floor, the still open laptop, its screen darkened, the tall window with the view he cherished of the redbud tree, and the green expanse of Turkey Run Hill. There are also a few less flattering pictures of me. In one, I'm bending to pick a stem of dame's rocket, and my bosom is practically falling out of my blouse. The interview went quite splendidly until the reporter, whose name was Daniel Powell, brought up the disturbed young woman whose lies sent bored Sebastian into his final downward spiral. How do I feel, Daniel asked, knowing that her memoir, which has been on the bestseller list for 14 weeks now, has officially outsold all of my husband's novels. I remember being shocked at the nerviness of this question, but I was firm and polite and told him no, I hadn't read it, but it was obviously a load of nonsense, and that the record would be set straight eventually. We soon returned to comfortable subjects and friendly chit-chat. However, Powell claims that I shut down after that, refused to answer any more questions, and that my jaw, quote, took on an angry, offended aspect, unquote. Obviously, he wrote what he thought the readers wanted to read, and rather than the truth. So much for modern journalism. He ended the article by describing how I watched him leave, quote, her face half hidden by the drawn curtain, her expression one of loneliness, grief, and a deathless bitterness, unquote. In fact, I was watching him back his call over my newly planted patch of daylilies. So I didn't care much for the article, but the cover for it, looking at it gives me a sense of confidence and strength. That is a woman who was married to one of America's most prominent novelists of the 20th and a bit of the 21st century. She is someone who has something to say. The photo is probably the reason for my book contract. In fact, honestly, this whole thing wasn't even my idea. It was a phone call from Gemini House that put the idea in my head, but yes, the record needs to be set straight. My word, how time has flown. I've been sitting at this desk for 3 hours and it's already late afternoon. Thinking about the New York Times article made me nostalgic for our upstate house, for its gentle dilapidation, its tall windows and clear light, unpolished wood floors. Its out-of-control grounds became especially out of control when Sebastian left, as I never could work up the courage to drive the lawn tractor. I hope the renters are taking good care of it all, but I have my doubts. Longing for the upstate house is more productive than longing for the Manhattan apartment, where that young woman managed to ensconce herself. Honestly, thinking about her showering in the bathroom I remodeled myself with the cobalt tiles and shower head that simulates rainfall is nauseating. Actually, I'm probably feeling a bit ill because I forgot to eat lunch. But is that the ice cream truck I hear slowly trundling down the road with its charming jingly little melody? I believe it is. I could go for a nutty buddy right now. Back in a bit. There's so much to say, just so much. It's night now and I'm restless. I can't sleep. Even over the air conditioner, I can hear the sounds of squealing tires from the main road down the island, not a real island. It's a long sandbar with a highway down the middle. One good hurricane and we'll all be washed away. Because all the young people come out at night and drive up and down from one bar to another, making a dreadful noise, honking and hooting and laughing. Morning is my favorite time of day, before all the partiers and vacationers have gotten up. Where to start? Perhaps where we met, that's as good a place as any. All right, perhaps you have heard of the Hazel Shade Colony. Of course you have. It's the most famous and well-regarded writers' colony in the country. I traveled to the North Country of New York State one summer, 1993. Just me and my Volkswagen Rabbit, and a small satchel of clothes and books. I hoped to secure one of the coveted writers' slots during the annual Writers' Institute, but unfortunately it was not to be. My heart was broken, I admit. For many years, I had been writing or trying to write while working at Ovid College as an assistant professor of composition. I was newly divorced again. Life, I felt, had become a terrible, repetitive grind. All good things, work, love, existence, seemed to return again and again to drudgery and dullness and pain. Hazel Shade, I thought, was an opportunity to break the cycle and to change my life. I could write. I knew I could write. I had done it before. When I was a young person, just finishing a master's degree in English literature and teaching, I wrote a short story and sent it merrily off to a journal. To my shock, they published it, and a well-respected anthology reprinted it, $1,000 prize as well. Unfortunately, that story was the last I would write for almost 20 years. This is not about me, though. This is about Sebastian. I had written my graduate school thesis on him, Mothers and Monsters in Sebastian St. James. I was an ardent Democrat. I doubt there's anyone who could claim spot as a greater fan. After my second divorce, at the age of 39, I discovered that Sebastian would be leading a workshop at Hazel Shade, and I knew my destiny was in hand. I would return to that world at last. Not getting a slot was an enormous disappointment. It flew in the face of destiny. In fact, I had already turned down the opportunity to teach in Ovid's summer program, so I'd have nothing to do between June and August. So I took the initiative, falsified a resume, and applied for a job as Hazel Shade's camp chef. After a phone interview, I was hired. Destiny works in strange ways. If I had actually won a writer's spot at Hazel Shade, I might not have gotten to know Sebastian at all. He was a wonderful teacher, of course, but outside of workshop, he avoided students as much as he could. He didn't join the nightly gathering in the lodge, where some of the other shaders, as they called themselves, drank cocoa and played music or cards. He was a writer, he told them. I only write, he said. The whole truth was that he couldn't stand the students. They all wanted something from him. They wanted his advice, his golden words of wisdom, the phone number of his agent. They wanted to appear in the acknowledgement page of his novel. He gave it his all when he was in class, but outside of class, he was inaccessible. He was usually drinking alone in his cabin. A couple of weeks into the summer, more stressful, exhausting weeks I could never have imagined, I was filling in for one of the line servers in the camp cafeteria. A hairnet on my head, a giant metal spoon in my hand, serving up the spaghetti sauce I had spent the day making. When Sebastian came through my line, it wasn't the first time I had seen him, although he seemed to have a private source of food. He had come through the meal line once or twice, and I had spotted him from the kitchen. I recognized him immediately. His broad chest and shoulders, his characteristic open collar and sports coat, and of course his trademark steel gray hair that swept up from his forehead like a crest, his deep-set, dark-rimmed eyes. My hands shook as I clawed spaghetti onto his plate. I was suddenly embarrassed at my hairnet and my lack of makeup. I barely got the sauce onto the noodles and then handed the plate to him over the sneeze guard. He took the plate, touching my plastic gloved hand with his warm finger, and our eyes met. When did you get off work? He asked quietly, much that no one else heard. But 10. He knelt back with the dumpster. At 10. It wasn't a question, it was a demand. Successful men are like that. I remember thinking, I thought that because I couldn't believe, I honestly could not believe what had just happened. I continued serving spaghetti to the mostly young would-be hopeful writers. Young people who didn't look at me, didn't see me, wouldn't have noticed or cared if I just dropped out dead, knowing that Sebastian St. James wanted to see me alone. After work, what did he want? I could guess what he wanted. I was trembling when at 10 on the dot, I took off my damn food-spotted apron, threw away my hairnet, washed my hands and face in the sad bathroom. I was wearing a nice enough blouse, thank goodness, and jeans, but my shoes were a pair of ugly sneakers. I would have killed at that moment for a tube of lipstick and a pair of heat sandals. He was waiting where he said he'd be, hidden from the moonlight and shadow of the dumpster, smoking. The moonlight is a type of muscle. Smoke, he said, offering me the pack. Not anymore, but sure, why not? I said I took one. What was I doing? I hadn't smoked since I was a teenager, and I couldn't turn down the first thing he offered me. You must be from around here, he said. No, actually, I'm from Ovid. He looked crestfallen. Too bad. He said, I'm stuck here without a car, and I was hoping you might know a place to get a drink. Oh, well, I do have a car. I'm sure we could find something of the sort. Grand, he said, throwing down his cigarette and smashing it. Let us be off. Of course, I had only the vaguest idea where the town might be from here, so I ran back into the kitchen and asked the janitor, JB, who was mopping, for suggestions on where to go. He pointed me down the highway. Thanks, I called to him, running out the door already. I took Sebastian to my car, which was parked behind the dormitory, where I shared a room with a teenage girl who worked in the kitchen with me. He had trouble finding the lever that pushed the seat back, so sat there with his knees folded up against the glove compartment. Here, I said, let me, reaching down beneath his legs. I found the lever and the seat shot back. Ah, better, he sighed and then leaned over and kissed me right on the mouth. I was too startled to kiss back much because I didn't know how to react to this. I didn't at all. I started up a stream of chatter about Hazelshade and the different writers and the gossip going around who was talented, which of the students already had a book contract and so on. In a moment of silence, Sebastian said quietly, you know, an awful lot from cooking. Oh, haha, I said I decided to be a mistake to admit that I too was a writer and what's more, a professor of composition. I'm just a curious person. It's all very interesting, don't you think? Yes, it is interesting, but how about we talk about something else tonight? I really need a break from all that. Of course you do, I exclaimed, of course. Then I didn't know what to talk about. There was the weather, but dear God in heaven, I wasn't going to talk about the weather with Sebastian St. James. Fortunately, I saw the sign for the bar that R&B had directed me to coming up on the left. Pandy's Charmers, it said, which struck me as a strange name for a bar. Now I said, this might be a little on the rough side. Sounds splendid, said Sebastian, who was already half out of the car by the time I pulled into a parking space. As he left my car, my eye caught the golden flash of his wedding ring. Sebastian went inside without me, and I sat in the car for a few minutes to get my bearings. It was strange how life turned out sometimes. After many long, dry, even terrible months for me, the miserable, dried-up end of my second marriage, the failure to secure a spot at Hazelshade, and many other things I won't get into in the moment, here I was, on some version of a date with Sebastian St. James. I'm not sure I believe in God, but if there is such a being, well, mysterious ways indeed. I gathered my bag and my nerves and followed Sebastian into the bar, which turned out to be an even rougher and more downhill than I would have imagined. It smelled strongly of pine salt and old beer, and of course cigarette smoke, since at this time, this would be 2002, you could still smoke in bars in New York. It was ill-lit and had a military theme. Actual guns and flags covered the walls, in between beer mirrors and posters of women in bikinis. The clientele all wore caps with beer logos on them, even the women, only there weren't many women at all. I got some stares when I walked in, which I chalked up to my not being a regular. This was obviously a bar that catered to locals. I smiled and squinted through the pall of smoke and saw Sebastian leaning over the bar like a local himself, looking comfortable and at home in spite of the fact that he was the only person in the room wearing a sports coat. No one spoke to us as we stood there, and we didn't speak to each other. The wedding ring was fully visible now on his hand, on the hand that held the $10 bill he was using to flag down the bartender. I knew he was married, of course. Everyone knew about his marriage to Anne McCarty St. James, how she typed everything for him, still, even in the age of computers, and how he dedicated every book to her. She was the daughter of the British war poet Nigel McCarty, a slender, shy woman whose looks were often compared to a deer or to a stalk of wheat. In pictures, she seemed bland and pretty and beige, but as I discovered in real life, those shy looks disguised the temperament of an old Norse berserker. They had been married forever. I began to feel a little odd about that kiss. A momentary lapse, I decided it was. But he saw me looking at the ring. It's over, he said, only I've gained weight and I can't get the damn thing off. Here, you try. Pretty sure the finger will have to be amputated appropriately. He held out the ring finger and I took it in my hand. The ring was definitely stuck on there. His knuckle was large and bulging. His hands were warm and surprisingly soft and covered in fine black hair. He pulled his hand out of mine in order to pay for the 2 drinks he ordered, 2 bourbons straight up. We found an unoccupied booth in the back. The table was covered with empty beer cans, which we pushed to the end of the table. Sebastian sipped his drink, and a look of deep relaxation washed over his face. I took a taste of mine. It tasted like varnish. My eyes watered. What's your name? He said at last. Lydia, I said, and I fumbled for the last one. I always fumbled as if I was lying, but I had 3 to choose from and chose my maiden name, Lydia Jameson. He laughed. If we got married, you'd be Lydia Jameson St. James. I said, if we. At that moment, the feeling in the room changed. A hush followed by whistles, and everyone turning in his seat. That was Rhian Ellis.
Should we stand?
I don't think
start yet?
Let's keep it that way. We haven't even kissed yet.
Of the
Yeah.
author, yeah.
Yeah.
Do I say my name at all?
You can say your name.
Okay. My name's John Frankel, and this is a story called Give Me Your Thoughts. Okay. George's friend, who ran the city sober houses, had another one for him, Dennis, a damn good floor mopper. But George wasn't sure about taking him in. He had two addicts still on probation. There was one of them now, Roger, sitting in his banged up 1984 red Mustang. George exited his Dodge van and saw a thin stream of exhaust sputtering from the Mustang's pipe and heard its chugging V8 engine. He knocked on the window. The window came down in jerks, 3 inches in all. "How's life?" George said, squinting in, seeing if Roger was alone. "Thought I'd have a smoke, old man. Stand aside." Roger blew his toxic gases into the cold air. George assessed his eyes. Not lidded. That was good. "I know, George, it was my night for dinner. Rats! 8 o'clock. I didn't realize it was so late. You know, Pike's Pies called me in to wash dishes. I was gonna text you." George nodded. Texting was just more data points. "I'll finish the cig and be right in," Roger said. Even if they disagreed on essential concepts such as the age of the earth, George, billions of years, Roger, thousands, they agreed that whatever they drove around in needed to be incapable of spying on them. Cars should be driven by people, not by computers. But he hadn't eaten all day and he was looking forward to Roger's chili, his signature dish. It would be nice if the kid wasn't lying, but it wasn't his business to decide if he was. And maybe that wasn't so important. "Mustang running okay?" "Like a dream." To keep the kids busy, they were in that vulnerable Jim, Jimmy, Janice age bracket. George taught them how to fix up old cars that were donated, some won from auctions, some lying dormant in backyards. There were washers and dryers too. The neighbors weren't fond of George's efforts, and they complained to the town about the endless garage sale. The latest citation on his desk sat on his desk unopened. There just wasn't a good solution to everything. George walked up to the farmhouse's front door, and once inside, turned on the hallway light and removed his coat and hung it on the hook next to the others. He got the farmhouse and land dirt cheap because of consistent neglect, like cars, sometimes like people, he thought sadly. He walked into the kitchen and flicked on the light. Dirty dishes leaned precariously in the porcelain sink. There wasn't one clean dish in the entire cupboard. He opened the fridge, remembering the tuna salad with pickles and special mayo that he was about to eat when Fred from Hot Soaps on Wheels called in a panic. "Friday the 13th, bad luck for me, George, but weekends we do most of our business. I need to have my burners and ovens working." Capping the leaning pyramid of dishes like a Christmas tree's shining star was the tuna bowl, its insides crusted with desiccated mayo. "Hey there, man," Sam appeared, pushing aside his bangs, his hair winging out in 5 different directions. All 6'3" and 170 pounds of Sam loped into the kitchen, and he gave George a bear hug, his 2 paws patting George's back. "Got your back, George," Sam said, smiling, then pulling away. "It's a little warm in here." George was sweating. "That 5 cord of wood needs to last the entire winter." He waited. Sam was still grinning. "See, it's just December, and we've already burned through 2 cord. "Oops, sorry, man. I figured Winston needed the heat. In dog years, he's over 84, way over. He likes the heat. Maybe that helps keep his mind sharp." "A sharp mind is hard to find," George said, returning to the fridge.
His eggs were gone, the cheddar cheese, the multi-grain bread. As he closed the door, he asked Sam in a casual way about the dishes. Just haven't gotten to them. Winston was whimpering, so I took him on a walk. I think he felt better, George. You know, companionship, the meeting of two alike minds. Thanks, Sam. How could he be angry with a kid who not only knew the meaning of autodidact, but cared? So, Sam said, straightening up to his full height, I made all my appointments this past week. Every single damn NA. Non-time. Even walked into town once. He beamed. That's great. First there was Roger. Then there was Sam. There was another guy in between who didn't work out, who stole from George. George went from a divorced empty nester to a committed surrogate dad. But George wasn't sure about Dennis. He didn't have the room. The kid never had a real family, his friend said. He's low key and he's a reader, just like you, George. He probably read some books that you've never even heard of, but he needs the right guidance and structure. And he's damn good with a lot. So there was this one dude at the meeting talking about how EEG electroencephalography, Sam said. Electroencephalography? That's it. It's like, well, geez, someone else can read your mind? I don't get it. Imagine the brain with its hundreds of thousands of neurons firing, giving off electrical signals. And just like with any signal, you filter the noise, you find the pattern, George said. With enough information, you can interpret the pattern. You mean you can read another person's thoughts? Yes. That's creepy. That makes jail look attractive. George nodded. But how do you know it's not fake news, Sam said. Remember from high school, primary sources? Kinda. People need to start reading books again, and not just about the lives of Estelle or Martin Buber, Adele or Justin Bieber. George smiled. Just wanted to let you know, old man, Sam said. I cleaned the butter dish. Huh? It was greasy, right there, see? And Sam pointed to a section of the unwashed kitchen counter, and there the plastic dish was. Its one side imploded from someone sitting it too close to the stove. Alone, but in all its glory, clean and taking command of the counter. Well, what do you know? Thanks, Sam. Sam gave George his goofy smile. One dish at a time, right? Let's get to these dishes. Tomorrow morning we'll start on that Nova. I've been thinking about how we can fix the brakes. Sounds great, man. Together they started moving the dishes from the sink onto the counter, and George would wash because he didn't like eating all the greasy dishes. And Sam would rinse because putting his hands in hot water made him grin and sometimes sin. Eventually Roger would appear and he would dry and put away all the dishes, every last one. Roger and Sam, they were like brothers now. And the kitchen floor, damn it, if that new kid, Dennis, could mop, the kitchen could use a thorough weekly cleaning. They could hang sheet by, and there'd be a new bedroom in no time at all. Small, but private. The farmhouse, for sure, was no utopia, but it was, all of it, completely theirs. That was my Pat Dutt. Thank you, Mary. It was always like the best thing.
That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. Let's hang out now. I want to thank Matt and Ron for making it sound so good too.
See if anybody joined us on Zoom. I don't know. Is anybody here on Zoom? Nope. Okay. There we go.